Hello and welcome. My name is on Reddit, Sleepy Vishla, and I am here to welcome you today for this event that we are super excited about. I am a moderator at the HermanCainAward over at Reddit, and I'm also a member of several groups that focus on COVID denialism and vaccine misinformation and vaccine hesitancy. If you, like me, have spent any time in those groups, you'll quickly see that there are many people concerned about loved ones, friends, colleagues, and others who are refusing to take the COVID vaccine. And if you want to share to the second slide, go ahead. And go ahead. There you go. You can see from this, as I've been cataloging them, from March 18th this year through November 20th, 72 posts have been made just on Reddit asking for advice on how to convince someone else to get the COVID vaccination. It's a huge, huge issue. And if you're here today, you may have even been one of those people, and you're probably concerned about somebody close to you. This event today came about because I actually stumbled across a tip sheet made by the guys that you're going to meet and hear from today. It's a tip sheet about talking with people about vaccine hesitancy. And as I read through some of the information on there, I got pretty excited. And you can see right there. We're going to provide you a link to this so that you can have this today as well. After being so closely associated with this issue for so long, I really felt that this could be another tool that you could use to speak with people that you're worried about. And I'll be upfront, today it's not about statistics and it's not about medical issues. We're not here to talk about that today. What we are here to talk about is to give you another tool with which you can have productive conversations about this emotionally charged topic. Because if you're here, you've already tried statistics and logic, reason, crying, bribing, begging, yelling, and many of you have probably just walked away. And I don't fault you for that, if that's where you got to. But the problem with all of those is that that is working, at some point, if you've used all of those, you have nothing left, right? And yet you're still concerned. So when I came across this tip sheet today, or this week, I got excited because this is going to show you a different type of approach from street epistemology. This is based on the Socratic method, and it provides a framework for examining a person's beliefs through calm and respectful dialogue. And it really helps you and they see if the methods they use to form that belief are themselves reliable. I'll be upfront, this may not, there's no quick fixes like everything. There's no guarantees. But at this point, if you're here, you're probably ready for yet another tool. And so with all that, that's my introduction, Anthony. I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thank you, Sleepy. Really appreciate it. I'm very excited to be here. I'm here with a bunch of friends. I've been working with these folks for the last year or so, developing a course to teach people this approach. I saw the word convince a lot earlier, and what we do in street epistemology is really not try to convince, but understand how people became convinced. So that flips the whole model. So this is probably counterintuitive to a lot of people, but we're eager to share this with you. I've been going out and having conversations with people for the last 8 years using this method, developing it, practicing it, sharing it with others in the community to try to get better at it. And I think we have. I've been uploading my videos to my channel, giving talks and workshops on this. And we even started a nonprofit organization. I'm actually here personally, just out of my own interest. I'm not representing the organization necessarily here, but I'm very excited to be here. This is going to be fun, I think, and probably a good learning experience for all of us. Let me hand it over to Reid Nicewonder. Reid, you want to go next?
Sure thing. Hello, everybody. This is going to be a lot of fun. Love the Reddit AMAs. And I've never seen a AMA like, with a live stream while we respond to the questions. This is going to be great. So I'm Reid Nicewonder. I have the YouTube channel Cordial Curiosity, and I'm also president of Street Epistemology International. Been a fan of SE for going on, 6-7 years now. Been a practitioner for a while, and I love it. Love the method, and I think it's going to really help a lot of people. So, all right, great. Let's go to Mark.
Hi, my name is Mark Solomon. I have the YouTube channel Being Reasonable, and I'm really excited to be here today because I think this is such an important issue, in our country right now, and if we can have these great, better conversations with others, and see where each other are coming from, and help people make better decisions in this area, I'm so for that. I got into street epistemology basically by first seeing Anthony's and Reid's videos on YouTube, and it seems like such a magnificent tool that I thought I'd try to give it a shot myself. So thanks for joining us.
And he did, and he's really good at it too. So make sure you check out his channel. He actually has some good examples of using SE with vaccine hesitant people at a rally in his area, which is really good. Thanks. Who's next? Go for it, Bob.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Sleepy, for having us. My name is Bob Swanson. I've got a YouTube channel, Mortgage Hill Musings. I'm a university instructor. I'm also a husband, a father, and a COVID breakthrough case survivor. But for me, it was a week of rather inconvenient symptoms, but a very mild case. But I really am attracted to SE, first of all, as a way of highlighting critical thinking skills, and particularly in this topic, which is so important to the welfare of so many. I think that it's really worth highlighting this approach. If you've done the debate and the emotion and all that kind of stuff, consider this at least another option. It may be more suited to your personality. I find that SE resonates better for me, works better for me than a debate kind of approach. So yeah, hopefully you'll gain a little bit of insight. I'll toss it over to Rom.
Hello, everyone. Happy to be here. My name is Rom Tarasov, or Rom for short. I come from Russia. So yeah, I'm a manager of the Russian street epistemology community, also a subject matter expert on the street epistemology course development team. And I really hope and believe that this approach that we're going to be talking about today has something interesting, something new and relevant to add to our everyday conversations about anything that matters, basically. So I'm really hopeful that this will be something of much use to you all. So I pass it on to Robert.
Oh, hello. My name is Robert Hamilton. I'm up here in Canada. I'm a longtime street epistemology enthusiast and practitioner without a YouTube channel at this point. But I'm the project manager for the Street Epistemology Course Development Project, and have been working on this for quite a while with this august team of experts in street epistemology. So yeah, it's SE, as we'll learn a little later on today, has a lot to contribute in terms of vaccine hesitancy and dealing with those kinds of conversations. I'll just mention very quickly, up here in Canada, we've already had our Thanksgiving up here. We're in our family Thanksgiving dinner. There was some yelling and debate on this very issue. So yeah, it's a very personal thing that touches people's lives in a very practical way. So with that, I'll pass it on to Nathan.
Hi, my name is Nathan. I have a YouTube channel called Abstract Activist, and I discovered street epistemology through YouTube videos. And the thing that really caught my eye is that this is an approach that anyone can learn, and I challenged myself to learn it. Read a couple of books, and before you knew it, I started going out and having conversations with people, recording them, and challenging myself to improve. So that I can make a difference and also learn. And this method has changed me a great deal. And it's also improved my relationships. And I'm just really excited to share this with this particular community, because this issue matters a lot to me. And hopefully this inspires you to change the way that you have conversations with people. And I'm just really stoked to get going today and answering your questions.
All right, thank you. So let's throw the slide up that shows the what is SE. I just want to spend 2 or 3 minutes on this, but I think it's important to let everyone know what it is we're talking about here. We're gushing about it, so it's probably a good idea to cover it. So we've spent months deciding how to actually define this, because it's been this iterative, organic developing thing. But in order to teach it, we kind of have to define it. So the current definition that we have and what we plan on presenting in the course is that street epistemology is a way to collaboratively and respectfully explore the reliability of the methods a person uses to assign weight to their reasons for thinking that something is true. And we have this little model off to the side here. If you want to think of this little pyramid as a representation of your conversation partner's beliefs, not your beliefs, but theirs. And that's a big shift. We're not interested in what you think about their claim. We're interested in how they're thinking about their claim. We're modestly interested in what they think is true. We're more interested and we want to spend more time on why they think it's true. But it's this lower level of the how that is the goal. You can see that we have some arrows. We're really trying to drive through a guided collaborative effort to understand how this person is thinking about their thinking. How did they determine that they have good reasons for thinking that they should take the vaccine or not take the vaccine? You can use this tool regardless of where you stand on this claim. And then right at the bottom, you can see genuine rapport. It's really important that we found to be cordial when you engage with people about these beliefs, even if you disagree. Maybe you've even argued with them, but there's a success factor, I suppose, that if you can have a good relationship with the person as you're exploring their beliefs and you're giving them plenty of time to process it, they're going to probably reflect on their views in a way that they haven't before. So again, this isn't about convincing people, but understanding how they became convinced by asking questions to help them reveal to me how they're thinking about their conclusion. Next slide is the why, and I think Reid and were you going to tackle that solo, or was somebody else going to help you with that? Right? I don't know.
I think me and Mark can tackle it.
Yeah,
or just anybody if you want to. Yeah, I'll just say a few things from the course. We have, goals related to what SE can do for yourself, and what goals related to what SE can do with you and an interlocutor, or for your interlocutor, the person you're talking to. And there are three main goals related to your interlocutor. You can merely attempt to understand your interlocutor, the person you're talking to, or you can go a little bit deeper and just collaboratively reflect together on what and why we believe in whatever we're talking about. But the next part is the next main goal. What we're probably most interested in is changing minds. SE can be used to change minds, we think, and some people would like to change minds about people with the topic of vaccines. So they would like to persuade them to potentially take a vaccine, a COVID vaccine. So SE can do that for you. But it's a little different from the usual form of persuasion. It's, we'll get into that later, but this is what SE can be used for. Anything else about that, Mark?
Yeah. And the way I like to think about it is for people who are coming to SE for the first time is we try to not focus so much on the actual beliefs when we have these conversations, which is really counterintuitive. If someone forms their beliefs, generally speaking, in an unreliable way to form beliefs, then even if they come to view that particular belief as false, the manner how they form their beliefs will dictate that more beliefs, false beliefs, will eventually take their place. And so this is more about having a collaborative conversation and about how we form beliefs, and is that a reliable way to do so? And we're hoping this will make a better impact.
Gotcha. All
right. Let's jump over to, next slide is the how.
Yeah.
Here we go. Rom.
Yes, all right. So Bob and myself will very briefly go through each of those basic steps of a common street epistemology conversation. There's so much more to talk about each of those steps, so we'll just go through the basics briefly and consider that those are not written in stone in any way. Think about them as just general guidelines or tools that you may or may not want to use given the circumstances, not more than that, even rearrange them. But but remembering them in such an order can also help you, especially in the beginning. So yeah, let's go through them one by one. Pre-conversation considerations is step 0, as we call it. This relates mostly to the venue and mental state considerations. Ideally, you want everybody to be comfortable. It should be one-on-one conversation if it's possible, and yeah, you just want both yourself and your conversation partner to be open and willing to discuss this specific subject between each other, and ideally no distractions, no background noise that can make things worse. So yeah, that's about the pre-conversation considerations.
And Rom, I'll chime in there. Another thing that you want to examine your own motivation first of all before we even get into the conversation. Why are you engaging with this particular person? That's probably a good thing to examine, so that you avoid trying to convince. We've been saying we're not in the game to convince people, and if that's starting to creep into your head, this is why I'm going to engage. I want to convince this person. That may be a good sign for you to pump the brakes and decide this is not the conversation you want to enter into. But if you have decided, okay, I'm going to approach this objectively, then the steps, we get into step 1, which is just establishing rapport. This is a conversation, and as Rom said, it has to be comfortable, and you don't just jump in badgering someone with a bunch of questions or drilling down too quickly. Part of making them comfortable is just establishing rapport, and depending upon the venue, if it's on camera like Anthony and Reid tend to do, then you do want to have informed consent. They're approaching the table in those cases. In other cases, if you're in social media, you may chime into somebody's post, and if they're posting it publicly, then most likely they're sharing it with the world. So it's not something that it's not a private belief, but still it's important to make sure that someone is aware that you're going to ask questions that could be a little bit on the probing side, and inform them of that, and make sure that they're willing, ready, and able to be part of the conversation.
Yeah, so this step cannot be overestimated. I think its importance, the rapport. I mean, because sometimes we're so eager to just jump on our conversation partners and to bombard with them with arguments and statistics and whatever, but it just doesn't work if they are not willing, if the environment is not respectful enough, safe enough for them to be open and willing to consider anything, basically. So just respectful engagement and genuinely trying to understand your interlocutor is just crucial. Absolutely. Without it, nothing else works. So first that, and then we can think about something else regarding statistics, facts, epistemology, or anything else. So given that, we establish rapport. Next would be to identify and clarify claim. And that refers to the fact that it's usually suggested to just pick one specific claim or statement or belief, if you may. And ideally, it should be clearly stated and crucial for your conversation partner, and just stick with that, because we can jump around through different claims throughout the conversation. You may think to yourself, oh wait, what did he just say? I want to discuss this now. Well, yeah, you may, but by default we suggest just sticking with one thing, discuss it till the end if possible, and then move on to the next one. Bob?
I'll just mention this step 2 is actually, if those who are new to SE, if you have that visual of the pyramid in your head, steps 2 through 5 are essentially building that pyramid. This is step 2 is the what part, and then we're going to move into the why and the how. So once you've identified a claim, as Rom said, it's really easy to get sidetracked going down different rabbit trails, but if you can keep the conversation focused on one thing, you'll be more likely to get down to the deeper levels, which is really what we're interested in to begin with. So in step 3, this is an optional thing, but quite often a very useful thing, is to identify the level of confidence that someone has in this belief. Once you've identified the belief and essentially defined what they mean by that term or that belief, then the question then becomes, how confident are they that is actually true? And you can scale it out however you want, numbers, words, whatever the case may be. But this is useful to kind of set a marker and perhaps return to later on in the conversation after you've explored the epistemology to say, was that number you gave me originally a true measure of your confidence, or has it changed at this point in the conversation?
Yeah, this is a very interesting tool, and I would guess that you don't often hear that in a conversation. I mean, questions like, how confident are you, say for a scale from 0 to 100? And this is a very useful tool. I suggest you just put it on your tool set, because sometimes people just think about whether they believe something or don't believe something. But even just thinking what would decrease my confidence, even if I don't disbelieve it all of a sudden, but just to decrease my confidence even a little bit or increase my confidence, that helps set ourselves on the right track of thinking about stuff. So it's a very useful tool. And yeah, nice thing to ask right after we have established the claim. Next, step 4 would be to identify and clarify main reasons. We know what they believe. We know how confident they are by this point. Now we want to understand the main reasons for why they believe so. And that brings us closer to the heart of it, to the epistemology. We want to understand their ways of reasoning, their methods that they use. So we ask for that, and don't confuse the reasons that come to their mind first with the main reasons. So one useful tool would be, after they tell you one reason, you can ask, if it was not for that reason, would that make it much different for you? And if the answer is yes, then probably it is a very significant reason, and you can and probably should proceed discussing it. But if not, they might say, well, no, of course not. Then probably look for something else.
One thing I'll mention, why the how is so important, and why I think that SE is different than a lot of other methods. I've changed my beliefs on important issues in the past, and it's never been because someone has thrown a bunch of facts at me, or it's quite often been my own self-reflection. I eventually come to realize, oh, the foundation for my belief is actually a little shaky, and it's been the self-reflection. And so that the how is just so important, and then knowing when to stop. We're not trying to convince people. We'd much rather people convince themselves that their methods for arriving at a belief are a little the foundation is a little shaky. And so quite often it's important to know kind of when to stop. You don't need to get a win. What you need to do is plant a seed. And we've used that metaphor many times in the past, but that's when you can end a conversation. When you've drilled down to the reasons why someone has arrived at a belief and introduced the idea of the reliability of those reasons. That's maybe a good place to end it then.
I have to say, as I listen to you guys talk, one of the things that gives me hope with this method is that what we see is that you talk about the reliability of the methods, and you talk about kind of really examining the reason. And one of the things that we see in our group is that so many of these people have changed their mind, and their reasons seem so contradictory. So I'm excited to see how this is going to play out when we actually, using this issue, right? It's that contradiction that you're trying to uncover at the end of the day.
Yeah,
right.
That's a good point. Thank you. And regarding contradictions, you might just think to not again jump and start arguing against it, but just try to understand it. Try to rephrase it. Like, are you saying that you mean this and that? And let them do the thinking with you. Don't do it for them and expect them to just understand that you found contradiction in their own reasoning. Let them do the thing, do the reasoning, and that's how people change minds. For ourselves.
Part of the mindset is also acknowledging that, hey, I might be mistaken. I could actually learn something from this conversation. So that again, trying to avoid the convincing. Part of it is just realizing, hey, I've got a limit to my own certainty on this issue, and I'm always open to gathering new information. Maybe this conversation will be that information that might change my level of confidence and wherever I stand on the issue.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
and sometimes it helps to start off if you can, your conversational partner, if you can tell their belief back to them in a way maybe even better than they can tell themselves or tell you their belief. If you can explain their belief back to them in a way better and even more concisely than they can say the belief, then that's a great way to start off. And then everyone knows where everyone's coming from and everyone feels heard, and it's a great place to start then using more of the method.
Yeah, that's a real good point.
Yeah, so getting back to those steps, we're almost done with them, right? So we've been through main reasons, and this step 5, identified, explore epistemology, can probably be seen as the goal. Ideally, if we have rapport, if we're on the same track with our conversation partner, this would be the step where we try to basically apply the scientific method, our best ways of reasoning to test. And we can just ask at this point questions like, how do you think we should test that? Or what new possible evidence would and should increase or decrease your confidence? Are there alternative hypotheses for that same evidence? And things like that. So our purpose here is to collaboratively engage in critical thinking process with our conversation partners, and just again try to hold back, not bombard them with arguments, but do it together, do it collaboratively, and see what happens.
And if you have used the confidence scale earlier in the conversation, this is the place where you want to apply it again and say, is the number you gave me earlier, now that we've investigated your epistemology, is the number you gave me an accurate measure of where you really stand? And then maybe a good place to kind of cut things off. But also, keep in mind, you don't have to go through all these steps. You don't have to have a little clipboard and check, okay, I hit step 1, step. A SE conversation does not need to include all the steps. It doesn't have to follow them in a particular order. This is not a prescriptive thing. It's just a general guide as to how to most effectively have an SE conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So don't think about those steps as something you should definitely do every time in every conversation. No, sometimes you just ask one good question that you haven't asked before, and that will bring you the progress you were waiting for. And sometimes if both you and your conversation partner are willing and ready to go deeper, well, consider going through more of those steps. And it's also important to understand when to end the conversation. And I'll just give one suggestion. It's a good way to consider ending the conversation if and when they genuinely think about something regarding their reasoning process. Ideally, after you asked a good epistemological question, they might just say, well, I have to think about it, or I don't know, or something like that. That would be a good cue for you to just consider ending the conversation at this point and let them do the thinking for themselves in their spare time afterwards.
How often do you guys refer to that Jonathan Swift quote, right? You cannot reason someone out of a situation they didn't reason themselves into. I'm sure I said it incorrectly, but as I hear you, so much of this method that's what it's about, right? It's helping them understand, because you can't tell them. They have to come to this place on their own. So using these methods helps them elucidate that, right?
Robert, you want to?
Yeah, it's at some point during this conversation, especially when you're at the epistemology level, you may experience a point of the conversation when your interlocutor will pause to think about what has been asked. You've touched upon something on a perspective of how they've come to know it's true, where they haven't really stopped to consider it. And so in those times, it's very important to let them think about it, let them consider it, embrace that pause for them to reflect, because it is in that moment of self-reflection that they begin to open their mind to changing their mind on what they think.
Very cool.
Nathan, you have any closing thoughts before we covered the what, why, how really well, and I'm so eager to get to examples. And people are probably wondering, like, how can I see examples? Do a search on YouTube for street epistemology and your favorite topic, and you'll probably find that claim being explored using this technique. But Nathan, you want to close us out before we get to some examples from the Reddit?
Sure. Yeah. Basically, the way I like to think about it is I'm practicing theory of mind here. And if the roles were reversed and I had something I wanted to say, how would, and the other person who's asking me questions doesn't believe in what I'm believing, how would I want them to ask me questions so they can learn from me, right? Totally. And through them asking me questions, maybe we can bridge a gap of understanding between the two of us. Whether that be me moving more doubting that idea to be where they are and their confidence level on that same scale, 0 to 100, or the other way around. And so it's about meeting in the middle, kind of resolving conflicts so I can figure out how they got to their conclusion. They're at the summit of some mountain that they call their belief, and I want to figure out how I can get there too, if it's true. If it's not true and I can't figure out how to get there, they may see that they're at the summit of this mountain and they have no idea how they got there either. And that is a very revealing experience to them. And so I'm trying to model the behavior I want to see in return. And I'm trying to put out my best foot forward and be a good example of how to be a good listener and be open-minded to ideas that are different than mine. And that's how I'm seeing this entire process is like that to me.
That's terrific, Nathan.
I think that's a really good point, because we would want, I was speaking for myself, I agree with what you're saying. Like, if somebody were to engage with me on one of my claims, I would want them to use this. And this isn't some secret tactic that you can use with the people who are vaccine hesitant and use it on the slide. You can teach them this as well to use it on your claims, and ultimately they'll probably use it on their own claims. We want as many people as possible to discover these tools so that we can all use it with each other. So it doesn't really matter where you stand on these claims. This is like an equal opportunity tool to help us bridge that gap of understanding, like Nathan mentioned really eloquently.
Like, I found this method because I was a political science graduate and I was trying to debate my friends all the time or debate my family, like whether that be for Thanksgiving. And we wanted to get this out there before Thanksgiving so that many of you watching can practice and maybe think about ways to have conversations around the Thanksgiving dinner table if it happens to come up. And I found that it really just doesn't work if you're talking to a flat earther, let's say, and they have their own set of facts about how they came to their conclusion. Do you think that giving them facts about how we know the earth is round is going to convince them? And so I want to know how they know it's flat. And then I also want to know like what it would take for them to think it's round. Is it even possible for them to wonder about what it would take for them to change their own mind? And exploring that wonder in their mind may help both of us understand each other better. And that's what I see this being for all subjects, basically.
Very cool.
Yep. Looks like we've got Andy Norman in the chat. Hey, Andy. He says, hey,
Andy
guys.
Norman. Oh.
Hey, Andy. Yeah. He's in one of my videos.
Andy's an author who wrote the book Cognitive Immunity. Is that what it was?
Yeah, that's right.
Immunology, I believe.
Cognitive Immunity. I can't say the title. Sorry, Andy. Great book. He's in the same space as us of technique rebuttal. That's what this is, where we're not focusing on the claim or not even necessarily your reasons, but the technique that you use to verify that you have good reasons for thinking that your claim is true. And it's a completely different model. But Sleepy, you're probably itching to start throwing some stuff at us here.
I know. So if you want to go ahead to,
there we go. Mental immunity. Sorry. Oh, look at that. Oh, what a great plug. There you go, Andy. Check out the book.
So what we've prepared for you today, if you want to go to our slideshow, we can show you. We've tried to break this down. So you've just gotten a bunch of theory from these guys on how this works, but let's put this in practice. And I do want to highlight one of the things that they said is that, this is something that takes time. It's not, a quick fix. But what we see in our group, because, as we watch, we see so many of the people we see that have gone down this path. They have been consuming these thoughts, and they've been told so many things for so long, and it's going to take some time to break that down, right? And so I just kind of want to highlight that out there of what you're working with. So what we've done today is we're going to take they have prepared this tip sheet, and in the tip sheet, there are 6 different kind of types of vaccine objections. So they've really broken this down for you. And in that tip sheet, they've categorized them. And what was very interesting as part of my group, where we look at and we see examples of people who are vaccine hesitant, is, and you can see there, the different, on that matrix, you can see the different types. So they have things like apathy, health and safety, paranoia, and phobia. The way that they got these, objections is they actually they crowdsourced them, right? Anthony, you asked, I think, on Twitter, what were the reasons that people were saying. Yep. And what was interesting was I went through, our archive, and of all the objections that they have done, every single one of them, I was able to find an example for it. These are all what people are saying. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to go through first, before we answer questions, is kind of show you what this looks like. So the first slide you see is health and safety. These are some common objections that we see. And you can tell these are all, these are from public posts that people have made or memes they've shared, basically of reasons that they don't want to get vaccinated, all in this health and safety category. Okay. So to show you what this actually looks like in practice, so that gives you kind of an assessment. If you look on the next slide, we're just going to take one. This one here. And this one's actually really kind of dear to my heart, because we actually see in our group a lot of young people dying right now. I mean, the latest estimate is 90,000 people have died that could have been saved had they been vaccinated, right? So we're all very close to this in our group specifically. And this is one we see a lot. People say, I'm young, I'm healthy, I don't have any underlying health conditions, right? So I don't need the vaccine. You see that. So what I'm going to say is, I'm just going to volunteer myself here. My background is in science from 20 years ago, but very long. And I can tell you right now that when I see that, if someone says that to me, I know exactly I would start approaching it emotional. And immediately my first thought is to start throwing statistics people, right? And as you're watching this in your own head, you probably know what you would say too. Well, why would you take the chance? There's still so many people. Haven't you seen how many people have died, right? And that's what you want to do. You want to start lecturing and saying, well, how can you think that? How can you say that? How can you not, right? All of those things. So instead of saying all of those terrible things that I want to say and throw statistics, what we're going to do is I'm going to ask Anthony, if you even want to start, what would be the first thing you would say to that instead of what I would say?
Yeah, let me just say, even before we get to like the SE type of responses, you might get lucky and give a fact or give your reasoning why you think that they should take it. And you might hit that chance that maybe that was the exact thing that they needed to hear, because we respond to facts too occasionally, but often than not, it's a stab in the dark, really. What you need to do is engage with the person to figure out what words they're using, maybe their level of confidence on that, because maybe they're like, I'm like at a 20 out of 100. It's not really that big of a deal. But they may be fierce on that position too. So you really have to feel them out and meet them where they're at, and then ask them questions to figure out what they would find convincing. That's the thing that we always forget to do. They're the one that holds the belief. Remember that belief tower? That is their belief structure. So we want to work through their reasoning. But I'd like to kind of open it up to us to kind of just bandy this one about and see how we would respond to it.
Well, I can start, I guess.
Yeah.
So if a person says, I'm healthy, I'm young, and that's why I don't want to take the COVID vaccine, it's all political, I will start to be curious. Like, okay, if a person is young and healthy, does it mean they shouldn't take the vaccine? Well, why is that? And I'm wondering, is it for them only, is it related only to the COVID vaccine, or maybe all the vaccines, or maybe all the medicine in general? So first I want to understand where they're coming from. If it's, for example, if it's only about the COVID vaccine, then I would like to understand what's the difference between this and other vaccines or medicine. If there is any, like if it's purely political, then again, I want to understand, what do they know? Maybe they know something I don't know. Maybe I'll learn that I don't want this vaccine. Who knows?
That's
But
a good point.
first, we need to narrow the claim and understand its limits.
Yeah, so maybe a good question would be something like, do you hold yourself to the standard just for this vaccine, or is it for all vaccines or all medicines? Maybe try to find out where they're breaking that down, and then you can maybe decide where to go next.
I would sort of jump in there as well as one of the things initially in the conversation, you want to have an accurate understanding of what the interlocutor is saying. And here you want to be able to actively hear what they're saying and paraphrase it back to them. And so what I hear being claimed in this statement is past health predicts future health. That is, past health is somehow protective in terms of future health. And so it is hopefully an accurate, active listening and understanding of what it is that they're claiming. So if that is in fact their claim, you can begin to explore the reasons for why somebody would think that past health is a predictor of future health.
And you don't have to like box them in either. You could say, this is what it sounds like you're saying. Is this correct?
Yes.
Right.
Because you're repeating back what you're understanding them to say. And that is such a great way to engage with the person, because it shows that you care to understand them. And if you're misunderstanding each other, you can correct that right away.
Yeah, and you place the responsibility on yourself and saying, what I'm hearing you say is this. Is that the case? You're not trying to be confrontational or accusatory, saying you're saying this, or you're telling them what they think. You know, you're just saying, this is what I hear you saying. Is that true?
How often, I'm just going to jump in. I'm just curious, how often do people just kind of look at you like, wow, you're listening? I mean, I feel like everything has gotten so ratcheted up and the volume is so high right now. And I think the people that are still continuing, I mean, you know, they're not holding on necessarily to facts anymore. I really believe if that was going to change your mind, it probably would have by now. We have people who have watched many, many family members. The most I've seen is someone posts about 12 people dying and they're still refusing to take the vaccine. And so, you know, the facts are gone. So it's like, because they're not being heard, it's like they ratchet up the volume and the insistency. Yeah. So how often when they just kind of look at you like, wait, you're asking me a question?
You're bringing up something interesting, because we don't normally engage with people about their deeply held beliefs in this way. So they're going to notice that something's different. So you could probably expect to see a reaction if you haven't already explained, like, do you mind if I ask you some questions about the vaccine? Or if it comes up organically, ideally, then you could give them a heads up that you'd like to ask them some questions, so they're prepared for a different style of engagement. Because if you don't do that, that's when people start getting like suspicious or guarded and like, why are you asking me all these weird questions all of a sudden? We don't normally talk this way. So you probably do want to address that at the start, so you don't get those reactions.
And if you do this kind of conversation correctly, especially with a stranger, often the stranger has absolutely no idea where you stand on the belief of vaccines, because what you believe about it really is irrelevant to the conversation. It's what they think, and let's go through the process of how you arrive to where you are now.
We often refer to this as being like to shoot your messenger. Again, trying to avoid this tendency to want to try to convince somebody right out of the chute.
Yeah.
But to answer Sleepy Wissla's question, I think we do sometimes get responses like, wow, you're good at this. Or I even got once or twice like, you should get paid for this. Especially if it's from the people we don't know very well and we're just getting acquainted, and they see it, they value it. It might be a bit trickier with people who you already know, because they might expect something different from you, as what Anthony mentioned.
Yeah, if you battle with them in the past, they're going to notice something's up. It's almost like a high compliment to somebody who's doing SE, where you hear, I don't even know where you stand on this, and you've really caused me to think about this in a way that I haven't thought of before. Where do you stand on it? And then you can share your view. And then at this point, it's probably not going to be an argument or a debate, because you've modeled a really good way of engaging with them, and they're going to probably do something similar in return.
Very cool. I love, no one has said the answer that's on the spreadsheet for that question, which I absolutely love, is another example. Who wrote that one, which says, you know, as a good question back. So you state it. So again, so I would say, okay, so that's what I hear from you. And then I love that ideal response, which is, can you think of other concerns besides your personal health that you might want to consider?
That's such a good one, because it's like, yeah, it's like, oh, well, I do share the society with other people, and maybe I do need to think beyond myself. It kind of addresses the what's the word I'm looking for? Like the ego, the inner ego that is maybe behind not wanting to get vaccinated because you think that you're okay. Like, there are other people in this world, but you can raise that issue with a gentle question like that.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, as opposed to messaging. I like Robert's point of rather than jumping on the saying, yeah, you may be 34 years old and healthy, but there's plenty of other 34-year-olds in hospital beds. Or, why do you hate your grandmother and want to endanger her?
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
just such a better approach.
I was just thinking we're going to come up with questions that probably aren't on that sheet, because there's thousands of questions you could ask that would probably fit the SE category. It's not like there's rigid window. As long as you're inquiring about what it is you're observing and you're giving them time to process it, it's probably an SE type of question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Anthony puts his finger on one of the key things with respect to this chart, which is that it's not a here's their statement, here's the optimal answer. There's no one answer to these statements and positions. These ideal or better responses are examples given certain principles that are used within SE, and so there are lots of other best or better responses that would be equivalent also and consistent with SE.
It's useful for someone who's actually seeing this for the first time to kind of play, try to answer it yourself and see where you fall. And do you tend toward the poor or the fair? And most of us are, at least if you're brand new to this, you're gonna fall into the poor and fair category far more often than you are into the SE category. But that's fine. It takes time to develop this kind of mentality.
Yeah.
We'll have a link to the spreadsheet somewhere. We'll put a link. It's probably in the video description if it's not already.
And that chat as well.
Oh yeah, Reid's driving this fantastically. And that answer says better response, not best. There's probably not a best response, but you can probably get. It's better. It's probably better than what you've been doing, but it's probably not perfect. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, keep your questions open-ended, meaning great questions that start with what, like. What do you mean by that? Or how? Like, how can we? Those kinds of questions typically yield an explanation rather than a yes or no response. And if people feel like they're being led to a yes or no, they can maybe raise their guard a little bit. And what we want to do is to lower our guard so we can wonder and think outside the box that we're normally confining our thinking into. And so that's why that's one of the better questions to ask.
Just consider this general rule. Whatever argument you can think of, your best argument, maybe against this claim they made, can be phrased as a nice question. Any argument you can think of. And to Nathan's point, don't make it a close-ended question. Don't say, don't you think, or don't you see? It's not a question. It's a leaded question, or it's just.
Or wouldn't that mean that?
Yes. Hidden argument.
No
is it possible
question.
that?
Yes.
Is it possible that ... you're wrong?
Exactly.
You don't want to trap. Don't trap or trick people. Like, you really do want to hear their best representation of their argument. You want to steal and help them develop their strongest argument. That's what steel manning is, and that's what we try to do.
Yeah, in the better responses, quite often you'll see we, and that's really important. Look at it as a collaborative effort, trying to get to the answer, or the best closest approach to truth that we can get to.
We might be mentioning that down the road, but yeah, the asking questions like what do you think, or it'd be better to ask how can we look into this as a team effort. Absolutely. That subtle little difference in the grammar really makes us feel like we're not so different.
Yeah.
And that we're working as a team to figure out what's true about their belief.
This is a
I wanted to add
collaboration.
something about that. Yeah, it is a collaboration, but make sure that your conversation partner doesn't think that they need to give you reasons that you'll find convincing. That's often what tends to happen when you use collab. They think, oh, I need to convince this person who's asking me all these questions. Like say, listen, I don't want you to convince me. I want to understand how you became convinced. And that again shifts the dynamic, that it's not about them needing to defend their view, but simply explain how they got there.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Let's pick another category to go through. Reid, you can pick another one of those. Okay. Motivation and apathy, right? This is the second one, I think, on that list. So you can see, and again, these are all comments that were taken that someone made. Actually, well, 2 of those are memes that I have seen many, many times online. So just haven't gotten around to it. It's too hard to fit in my schedule. I'm willing to take my chances. And then the last one, if it's my time to die, then it's my time to die, which is crazy, but I see that a lot. So if you go ahead, the one that we're going to look at and discuss, go to the next slide, is this one. Just because, someone's afraid of COVID doesn't mean he or she doesn't believe in it. She understands the risk, but doesn't prioritize fear over life. And to me, this is like, I'm willing to take my chances, right? That's just kind of meh. So how do you approach somebody who has that kind of just an apathetic response? To me, my first response again is going to be statistics, because that's my brain. And so I want to say, how can you say that? How can you not care, right? A 1% chance is still a percent, right? And I want to start arguing back. So when you have somebody like that, guys, what would be the better approach?
I think almost the same question as for the previous case would work just fine. Can you consider other reasons to do that than just thinking about your own life? And consider not phrasing it, well, don't you think about other people, but an open-ended question. Can you think of other reasons people might want to take this vaccine besides fearing for their own life? And even if they say they can't, you can ask the next question. Well, if there were other reasons, would you like to know them? All kinds of tools we have.
I just jump in here quickly. Sometimes an interlocutor can make an explicit claim and an implicit claim. Explicitly, they can say, I'll take my chances. Implicitly, the unsaid claim made is, and those chances are pretty good for me. In other words, this is the unsaid claim that we need to sort of uncover in terms of what people are saying. So sometimes people express their claims in a very indirect way, and you have to kind of identify the actual claim that is being made when they make those statements.
Yeah, I think Robert's on to that. I was thinking it almost sounds like a very flip response. And I would almost be tempted to think, well, maybe this person, the reason why they're vaccine hesitant is maybe not what they're actually stating here. And so the clarification that Robert just made is probably a good one to make at this point.
Yeah, I'd be curious how they're calculating their chances. So you could repeat it back. So what I think I hear you saying is that you've run some sort of calculation through your mind. I don't know how rigid it was, but you've come to the conclusion that there's the chances of you being affected by this are really low. And they may say, well, yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. Good. And then you can maybe shift to, well, how are you determining that your chances are low? Or at what point would it be a cause for concern to get the vaccine? What is your threshold? So again, you're working within their belief model to understand at what point would they switch over. And that is usually when they may say, well, that's not really my real reason. I watched this YouTube video and it really scared the shit out of me, or something like that, right? It could be something.
Right. And you've not thrown out any statistics at that point.
No,
Yeah,
you're not throwing out any data, because
Mm-hmm.
data may not even be a factor in their position on this claim.
Right.
You have to figure that out.
And sometimes in these scenarios, it's helpful to not talk about the person themselves. You can use like a made up person, like we're going to make up Jimmy sitting next to you, and we're going to talk about, let's say he's trying to decide whether he wants to take the vaccine or not. How can we help him decide based on this scenario or that scenario? And it takes the person out of it. And we're just talking about this third person.
Yeah. Let's say you found somebody that you would say was that they should definitely be taking it. But they thought their chances weren't like a risk to them. What would you suggest that we say or ask that person to help them take another look at their view. And now you've taken the pressure off of yourself and them, and it's about this third party who's not even in the room. You're thinking about your thinking. That's the guided that's the metacognition part of SE. You're thinking about how you think about things.
Very cool. You want to pick another one, Reid, to go through? Risk assessment threshold and threat threshold. So kind of similar to the apathy one, I feel like. And of course, these these categories aren't hardline, right? There's a lot of overlap between them. But basically somebody said, the vaccine's not effective enough, or it's ineffective, or, there's other options that are better. And then of course, the one we see all the time, well, it has a 99% survival rate, 99.99 we see as well. So the one that we'll do a deep dive in, if you go on the next slide. So it's not effective enough. This is, from someone's post. These, they don't stop spread. They make it worse. There's no evidence of stopping death. It's just, they're just not effective. Why would I do it? So, my response, of course, would be, well, gosh, any benefit's better than none. That's what I would want to say back, right? And so tell me, guys, what's the better way to approach this?
This could be a good situation where you could have the person you're talking to and yourself come up with a test of the vaccine, and come up with a test. If the test was run sufficiently to their expectation of how tests should be run, then, if a test came out one way, they'd feel more confident about their belief. And then if a test came out another way, they'd feel less confident about their belief, and have them involved in creating that test.
I agree. We can just ask for Cyrus, what do you think would be the best way for us to know whether it's good enough or not? And find out the reasons first, and then explore them further.
Yeah, so many of the people we see don't know where these numbers or where anything is coming from. It's just something that they've seen and they're passing on. And I love this thought of saying, I'm going to listen to you. I'll take you seriously today instead of just discounting you, right? I'm going to listen. Let's look at this together. How could we figure this out? I love that.
And this particular topic this is a tough one for me to shoot my own messenger on this one, because I had the vaccine and I got COVID breakthrough case in August and had a minimal case. It was effective for me. So there's a real temptation to want to just share my story. And there was other folks that I know got COVID at the same time, were unvaccinated, from friends who were dead by mid-September. And so I feel like that's a compelling story, but not really. Again, it's not about me trying to convince the interlocutor. But that it's a tough temptation. It's tough to not go in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one thing I would just add just very quickly, which has to do with a thread of rapport. You want to ensure that you have a common ground between yourself and your interlocutor, and you can see in the premise of this position that they are interested in solutions. And so if both sides are interested in pursuing effective solutions, this is a common ground from which you can proceed. So focusing on that, referring to that, mentioning that can help build and maintain the rapport of the conversation.
Yeah, they're saying the vaccine is not effective enough. So there must be some threshold by which they would say that it was effective. You need to kind of find that tipping point for them.
Mm-hmm.
What would they need to see in order to be convinced that it was effective?
Right.
And they may give a stat that you can back up at that point. And that would be the point to double check to make sure that they would find it convincing, and then work with them to show them that information. Like remind them, like from what we talked about, you would need to see this. Does this match your requirement? Now they may still say, well, there's something wrong with it, or I don't trust the source, and you have to keep drilling down and going where they take you. Don't get frustrated if that happens. Many times the reasons that people give you aren't the reason that is contributing to their level of confidence in their position. You need to kind of rinse and repeat.
Yeah,
there's a shortcut you could do too to get through that.
And also, if you have to give it, if the opportunity comes up to give a stat, don't just give the stat. Tell the story of how that stat came to be, like who tested it with how many people, and what were the results from that test, and just make that very clear, so that would be more trustworthy than the mere number.
Yeah, don't just immediately give people stuff. Make sure that what you think you can provide to them, that they will find convincing, and get some buy-in first. Like, yeah, if I saw that, and if it was from like a trusted source, and you could define what those are, then I probably would find it convincing or compelling. Cool. Let's go together to this website and look it up. You could do that.
Yeah. Well, so those are some. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I just wanted to say, I'd like to suggest another general rule. Whenever you desperately want to share an argument, you can do that, but first just get a buy-in from them first. Ask them if they are interested in such kind of an argument. If such an argument, if it existed, would sway them anyhow. Then if they say, yeah, sure, if there was such a statistic, I would be interested in it.
Yeah.
Then share it, but gently still. Yeah. That's what I would say.
How much of their confidence would shift if they learned that new information?
Yeah, exactly. That's why we ask the confidence question, because we want to bounce up reasons that surface that they might entertain and see if they would allow it to impact their confidence one way or the other, either up or down. It's not always down, by the way. Like, we want to see if this reason would move you in any way. And that's like a real reason check, we call. We want to make sure that we're providing reasons that will serve to impact your confidence one way or the other. Like, we would want to have beliefs that are backed up by reasons and evidence that serve to influence our confidence, right? And checking to make sure is really important.
Mm-hmm.
You alleviate a lot of frustration if you do that on both sides too.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, should we take some questions, guys? I mean, so that we kind of move on to the next section.
Sure.
Yeah.
So
ready.
slide 21.
We
I want to hear that
questions.
the nitty gritty of the real questions out there on Reddit. That'd be fun.
Yeah. So the first one is one that I think, because again, this is slightly different in how we're approaching this. Actually, slide 21, right here. You guys think of this a little bit in the framework, right, of not being as connected. But today, this is about something that you're connected with, right? This is about someone you care about. And so how do you, if you can think about doing this in your own lives when you have, because I know you've done this in your own lives too, with issues you care about. How do you stay neutral with somebody when you are so emotionally wrapped up in this and you do want to just, are there different techniques or ways that, people can use?
Well, I can think of something, but I would just say, use your own discretion. Though the way I think about it is I'm thinking about how I would want to best represent my ability to know their side, so that if the roles were reversed, how I would want to be treated. And if you're wrapped up emotionally, I would just recommend channeling that emotion into this understanding that it's probably going to be more effective to calm down and slow down and breathe a little bit and think about the way they're thinking rather than think about the way we are thinking, right? And what's going to be most effective?
And if it's too much emotionality, too high, sometimes it helps to talk about an analogous belief. Talk about if you were to decide whether the world was flat or round, how would you go about deciding that? And you're talking about some completely different belief, but you're actually still talking about how they form beliefs and how they would go about knowing the things they know, and with something that's there's no skin in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Regulating your emotions also might help. I totally can feel you how it might be difficult, and it is extremely difficult to and painful sometimes to just watch the people who are close to us refusing to take a vaccine, for example. But even given that, if we just get emotional, if we try to defend our position or make them do what we want, chances are it wouldn't work. So first things first, probably try to just regulate your emotions, establish rapport, establish trustworthy environment, then consider discussing it with them.
And if we look at our steps, step 0, is this something you want to get into? What's your motivation? And clearly this is a loved one, and if you're that emotionally, if you're scared for them, then it's certainly something you want to pursue. The key is how to pursue it in such a way, certainly you're sincere and they're going to feel your sincerity, but how do you approach it without throwing out facts at them and putting them on the defensive? Because if they go on the defensive, then you're not going to make any progress as far as changing their beliefs. That's where you have to avoid throwing facts and start drilling down on why are they convinced that their position is correct, and you start the process of building the pyramid at that point.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you're scared for them or you're emotionally entangled in the situation, then you're bringing that baggage with you to that conversation. That's going to put you off on the wrong foot. So you need to find out a way to deal with it. And maybe one of the ways that you can deal with it is to just be brutally honest and say, I want to be as neutral as possible on this, but I'm really scared that you're not taking this vaccine. This is how I'm feeling. I'm feeling scared, but I want to talk with you about this, and I want to try to set those emotions aside so that we can really explore why you don't think that this is true. So you've acknowledged these things that are possible impediments to the conversation. Hopefully your conversation partner will respect you for disclosing it, and they may even reveal something similar. Yeah, I'm a little hesitant about having this conversation with you too, because I could tell how passionate you are about it. So now you've just completely neutralized that big thing that was holding you back, and then you can have a really good talk.
Yeah.
That said, it is one of the sort of success factors of SE to try to maintain a kind of a stoic, dispassionate, neutral perspective with respect to the claim. Even though it's true, you do have skin in the game. You do have you are emotionally attached to the situation. You need to try and be as neutral as possible. Sometimes that's very difficult to do.
It takes practice. Like speaking for myself, when I started going out and having talks with people, I was so agitated and animated, and it took me years really to get a hold of my emotions. So there may be some topics that you just struggle with, but recognizing that those are those topics that you struggle with, it might be best to leave that conversation to somebody else who can maintain their composure. This is where you start doing some introspection about your own abilities and what you can maintain and control.
It's part about knowing yourself too, knowing some things a person says that triggers you automatically. You know what can be said, that you just push your hot buttons. So at least knowing in advance what those are will help to manage things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's a tough thing to kind of walk, is that you want to be motivated to have the conversation to begin with. So it's got to be something that kind of pushes the button to a certain extent. And as Anthony recommends, but then acknowledging, we're not without bias on almost any topic. We're going to have it. Acknowledging your prejudices and your biases and your preconceived notions at the outset, and trying your best to set that aside for the purpose of the conversation is probably the best way to go. If you don't care about it, then you're probably not going to have a conversation about it to begin with.
Whenever I think about this question, like, what if I'm too emotionally wrapped up? My inspiration is Daryl Davis. And if you've never heard of Daryl Davis before, it might be worth a Google. A black man who talks to KKK members. Like, blows my mind. And the amount of good works he's done in talking to those people is truly inspiring to me. And if he can do that, how can we learn from that experience? How can we apply that to this? And that whole story really inspires me to make a difference in having these better kinds of conversations. Well, he's not exactly doing SE. He's doing something that's very, very similar.
He's taking his ego out of it, isn't he? Like, that's a big part of SE. Like, take yourself out of it, make it about them. And
he's looking at the bigger picture. The bigger picture here, which is like, what is going to help us? What's going to make a better world? What kind of world do I want to live in? Do I want to live in the kind of world where I'm like just shouting right back at them? Is that going to work? Is that going to be effective? And so I use Daryl Davis as an inspiration for that question.
And I would recommend watching Reid, because I think he does a great job keeping his emotions in check. When Reid does, check out some of his SE talks, and it's almost disarming. He keeps his emotions in check so much because the person who's talking to them, they're free to say whatever they want, and they're not, because they don't get any emotional that kind of negative feedback coming back. And so that's a good example if you want to see that happen.
Yeah, just go ahead. Take that, Reid. You deserve it.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah. And it might just be personality types as well. It depends on who you are. You might need to do some things to actually get to that point where you're kind of at an emotional poker face. And one other thing is, rather than having, jumping into the deep end of discussing should everyone take a COVID vaccine, maybe another, shallow end of the pool topic would be, should kids take Flintstone vitamins? You could do SE on that more safe topic. Maybe not, and just practice it that way. Give people a heads up. I'm trying this new thing. And rather than jumping into the deep end, practicing it on some safe thing like that.
Very good.
And also, just remember that it takes time. Oftentimes it takes sometimes even a lot of time to just build this relationship between you and your close ones, for them to trust you enough. So if I may, I will quickly share my personal story. There was a time when me and my mother didn't have a very trustworthy relationship, and she wouldn't listen to me if I told her anything regarding what I found important. But I started trying to slowly build more trust, and I was surprised when I noticed significant changes. And by the time the pandemic hit, we already had this much more trustworthy relationship. And she called me, and she was very hesitant towards taking a vaccine, and she shared her concerns with me, asked for my opinion. So we slowly went through all her concerns regarding this vaccine, and that helped a lot. But it just sometimes takes time. If it was like 5 years ago, I don't think she would have called me, but last year she did. So consider that as well.
Cool. What other questions we got?
Next one.
So Sleepy, did you want to read that
Sleepy?
one? Oh, maybe Sleepy is muted.
There you go. Sorry about that, guys. So this one is an exercise, basically. So I'll read it. I had my first street epistemology conversation with my husband about vaccinating our children, and it was difficult, but I found out much more about his point of view than I would have. Normally, our conversations on the topic might go point, counterpoint, point, counterpoint, with neither of us budging. The conversation allowed us both to explore how we arrived at our beliefs, and we were able to come up with questions for our pediatrician related to our differing beliefs. His claim is that not enough time has passed in the studies of children 5 to 12, and not enough children had participated. His certainty in his belief was 60 versus 40. His rationales, based on previous history with the adult vaccine, specifically J&J with regards to blood clots, he fears that we will learn about a severe side effect later after many children are vaccinated. He believes the risks of COVID to children are low, and that if our children get COVID, they'll be fine. He believes the risks of the vaccine for kids outweighs the benefits. And if I were not in the picture, he would not consider vaccinating them at all. It seems that after our visit to the pediatrician, his beliefs are unchanged, and the goalposts have now moved. Instead of wanting to know that 100,000 kids have been vaccinated in the first 2 months, now it's 5 million kids in 3 months. So these are the questions and answers we got from our doctor. Are your own children vaccinated? The doctor said yes. Every pediatrician had vaccinated their kids. Are you seeing severe COVID cases in kids 5 to 12? Yes, one 10-year-old just spent 3 weeks in the ICU. Are you seeing vaccine side effects in kids 5 to 12? No, we vaccinated 1,000 kids in a week without a single adverse reaction. Is the Delta variant more contagious in kids? Yes. Is Delta more severe in kids? Yes. I don't think enough time has passed and that it's been studied enough. How long should I wait before I know? There really isn't any time I can give you to answer that question. For me, I have access to the studies from Europe that were conducted earlier than the American trials, and that allowed me to make the risk-benefit assessment for my own children. While the risk of COVID to children is low, we just don't know who will get a severe case, and that's why it's important to have protection from the vaccine, which will prevent hospitalization and death. After this discussion with the doctor, there wasn't any movement in his beliefs, and he discounted some of the things she said. Now I'm afraid he'll never be comfortable enough. So my question is, how might I go about having follow-up conversations? My goal is to get him comfortable with vaccinating sooner than 2 months away. I'm worried about the holidays, and at least 2 young children in our region have died recently from COVID. At least 1 case of Miss C in our district, and we've had a lot of cases at school and in kids we know. All right, guys. So what do you do with this one?
Well, the reason why I love this question so much is because it's so real world, and it's not clear cut, because you have 2 people who really want to do the right thing, and they're coming at it from slightly different epistemologies, and they're weighing risks and benefits, and they are both agreeing to try the method of street epistemology to try to get at hopefully what's true and real, if that's possible. And I think that I like that this represents conversations we often see in the real world.
I like that, in the first paragraph, she says that she learned more about his position than she would have had she not, but it is, there are considerations here, because this is a husband and wife. And the fact it's not something that's going to be solved in one conversation. It could be very well be an iterative thing, and she worries that he's apparently moved the goalposts a little bit, and that's that happens in SE conversations with strangers, and it's even more difficult to navigate when it's someone you're living with.
Why does that? Do you see that? I mean, how frequently do you see that where you have that, what it's called in psychology, right? There's a backfire effect sometimes when you get too close. How often, and do you see that, and kind of how do you approach that?
Literally backfire effect when you present your interlocutor with arguments, or they know something that maybe contradicts what they thought, and they double down back. No, it's not the right way to say it. But yeah, literally this backfire, I don't remember seeing it ever in my real-time conversations. But people can move goalposts sometimes. It happens. It might be sad. So I don't think this should be considered as something significantly different. I would just go about the same way, try to understand what is his current position, why he thinks this way, what is the real reason. For example, if he increased his confidence that COVID vaccine is dangerous, what was this reason? Is the real reason, like if there was not such information, would it change anything?
Well, and he seems to also, and maybe this is maybe somewhere that she might explore for the next conversation, is he seems to have assessed a threat level from these unforeseen side effects. And question, how has he determined that threat level? Because that's at his current position going to always outweigh any immediate benefit from taking the vaccine. And so you really want to probe that part of it.
What's this, Reid?
The classic oatmeal comic about the backfire effect. It's like, people were put in an MRI machine. They were given some examples of political examples and arguments. And it seemed to be very similar to someone encountering a predator. So that's what the backfire effect research is based on.
Do you guys think that is a different, to me, my first, response, I think, is that not his real reason then? Right?
It may not be. Yeah, I would call attention. Like, I noticed that you said this 2 weeks ago, and now it's this reason. What was the shift? I don't know if that was covered or not, but I would want to get into that. And what would cause it to shift again? How tight are you now to this new standard? And have you set the standard for taking the vaccine really high compared to your standard for not taking it? And now you can explore that gap. Why might you have a higher standard for taking it as opposed to not taking it? Could probably be a good place to go as well.
And I'd be interested to find out what information he thinks that he will be able to obtain from 5 million people versus 100,000 people. And what is that extra number does he think in his mind is going to help him make a better decision? I'm kind of curious where he comes from that.
Yeah. What exactly are you waiting for here? Is it just the report of a higher number, or is there something else inherent in the data that's leading you to change your mind? Oh, you're muted, Robert. I hear your lips move.
I really,
I see your lips move.
I was just talking. Yeah, I really like the scenario because it fairly portrays the vaccine hesitant is not wearing tin hats and being irrational. The husband is trying to be as rational as he can. Focusing on the key facts that he feels are relevant, and it's driving the conclusions that has reached. But I think the elephant in the living room here, in terms of the scenario you see portrayed, is that he's only 60% confident in his position. That is to say, there's plenty of room for doubt in the position that he's taken, and so I would explore that much more in terms of there's things that are giving him pause. What are those things? It's a question to perhaps exploring that.
And a disarming way to ask a question for him would at first ask him, what would make you more confident in belief? You're only 60-40. What would make you 70-30? What would make you 80-20? And I'm sure he would, I'm not sure, but he'd likely be able to, come up with those reasons. And then when he's come up with the reasons, what would make him more confident, then you can reverse the question and say, okay, what would make you less confident in your belief, from 60-40 to say 50-50? And when you ask a question that way, it sometimes can help the person feel more relaxed and heard, and it makes it seem like that we could go either way on your confidence level, depending on where the evidence takes us.
So you can see why in the outline for the steps of street epistemology, why confidence level is important. It's relevant to the discussion, and how it can be used as one of the tools within the SE toolkit to explore the conclusions that people come to.
You may also find that you're talking to somebody who's 100% confident. They couldn't possibly get more confident than where they currently are. That's in that case. I might ask, does that mean you're closed-minded to this idea? Like you've made up your mind and you can't revise your belief at all? And if a follow-up question to that could be, if I took the opposite position and I was 100, and I told you I couldn't possibly revise my belief, what would you think about me? So a great way to do an outsider test for being steadfast in a position that couldn't possibly move.
Yeah, that confidence scale is really useful. What would it take to get you to a 100 if you were at a 60? That's really good. Yeah.
And one thing, being a husband-wife thing, it may be useful for the wife to think back. Are there other times in their relationship where he has changed his mind on a certain topic, and she may want to go back to the well, and how was that done? Did she help to affect that?
Very cool.
And maybe I'd like to share another practical advice. It will work for this case and for other cases, I guess. Sometimes it's good to just repeat back what your interlocutor is saying and show them you understand them, but think about it to yourself. Like you ask for their reasons, and you can just repeat back. So are you saying that this information that they only tested 1 million children and not 5 million children should make us hesitant? That's interesting. And just ponder that and let them think about it. If it doesn't make much sense, they might pick it up for themselves. If it does, well, then we can explore it further. Maybe you will change your view on this. Or maybe you can follow up with questions like, is it important for you what experts think about it? Would it mean that even if experts think it is enough, we should still think it's not enough? That's interesting. And you can just leave it at that for some time.
I love the fact they're both working. I love the fact they drafted this list of questions for the pediatrician. That shows that they're both working to try to come up with a solution here. And focus on the fact that they need to come up with a decision one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
And occasionally you'll talk to somebody who's 100% and they refuse to come down on their confidence level. And that brings up an important concept of falsification, where if a person's at 100% and nothing will bring them down, no matter what you show them, what they can. And it's interesting to see how they view beliefs at that point, because the way they view that belief and maybe other beliefs is that they're wed to the belief, because if nothing can show them otherwise, they no longer hold the belief. It looks like the belief holds them, really. Mm-hmm. And that's a useful conversation to discuss at that point.
One thing I like about the confidence level, kind of, asking them that is, if you ever read some of these narratives that people post on Reddit about their relatives changing and becoming very different over a short period of time, to where now they're, and maybe they weren't against vaccines before and now they are, as you watch them shifting, it's often this question of you try all these methods, but at some point, sometimes you do have to walk away, right? I mean, sometimes you can get into, as you have relationships with somebody, that if they're, at this 100% and not willing to make any movement, how do you know when that is? How do you know when you say, you know what, this relationship's no longer healthy for me to be around? And I know this is moving more into psychology and not your area as much, but I feel like that's another healthy or helpful piece for us, is kind of to say, you know what, if someone's going to say that, then that's telling me a bit about what I need to know, right? Like, if they're not interested in if they're not interested in ever changing or ever hearing anything, then maybe that tells me that I have exhausted my efforts, right? I feel like that's something that would be helpful for my group, to hear. And it actually kind of leads into the next question that I thought you guys could take on slide 26, which is kind of related to this. And this one is, keep going. Yeah. How do you get through the cloud of misinformation? So talking about these extreme cases, just like you said, this 100%, right? If you can't agree on the same set of facts, how do you approach this with somebody?
I think with this one, we want to figure, like, if it's a cloud of information, to me, in my mind, that, and maybe I'm misinterpreting, that means like they're gish galloping you a little bit. Like, maybe they've got a lot to tell you that's all this information, and it's like 100 bullet points. I want to divide let's say they're 90% confident in their idea. I want to see which one is the biggest reason. Which reason has the most effect on their number? And if I take away this reason for you, hypothetically, and I'm not saying that this reason isn't a good reason, but let's just say it's a bad reason for a second. Or maybe let's say this reason is not available to you at the current time. How much does that affect the total number? Does that number drop at all? And if it doesn't drop, is it really a reason to get to the 90? And if it doesn't affect the number, keep fishing for what does affect the number. And whichever one affects it the most is the one I probably want to focus on first.
Well, and you mentioned too, kind of the Flintstones things versus, right? I mean, starting with something that you've got to find that shared understanding, and starting with something maybe easier too. As you get through that gish gallop, if you have all of those, okay, like you said, so what's the smallest contributor and what is the biggest contributor, right? To these,
that helps. Sometimes I almost think it's like it's a defense mechanism when somebody just keeps throwing claim after claim after claim after claim, and now you're like, I don't know where to go. You have to isolate a claim. They can do the same thing with reasons. And to Nathan's point, let's figure out which reason has the most impact in your confidence that this is true, and then you drive down to the epistemology. Well, how did you confirm that that's a good reason? But just to take a step back, this idea of a cloud of misinformation, that suggests to me that maybe there are many other beliefs that this person has where they're gleaning information from suspect sources. Now, it's tempting to say, but your sources suck or something, or like, I know the sites that you go to. Why do you even trust those sites? Right. What I do in a situation where I think that somebody might be conspiratorial minded, or they're just glomming on to whatever might appeal to their desires, confirmation bias, I'll usually take a step back and say, can you walk me through your process for how you decide which site that you'll believe and which site that you won't? You're stumbling across websites and forms of information all the time. What is your process for saying that's a good site as opposed to that's a bad site? Talk me through your reasoning process on how you make that decision. So now you're not even talking about claims or reasons. It's this meta discussion about how you decide what you decide to believe.
And can I tie back to the husband-wife? Because they went to an expert. They went to their pediatrician and with a list of questions. And even then, the husband was suspect of some of her answers.
Right.
Well, that's really interesting because they both agree this is not different sets of facts. This is the same set of facts, and yet they're still viewing them differently.
And how many times did they go to that pediatrician? We keep coming back to that one example, but how many times did they go to that pediatrician and that doctor made some recommendations and they didn't challenge her views on the recommendation? Like they just went along with it. But there's something unique about this one in particular. What is it? Share your observations.
It sounds to me like the husband and wife in that scenario, or before they speak to the pediatrician, agree that this is a reliable source of information. We will ask the pediatrician questions. But all of a sudden, when the pediatrician comes up with answers that the husband doesn't like, suddenly he's not as a reliable source anymore.
Right.
And open to question. So the idea then is these are clear evidence of confirmation bias, right? So the idea then is to be able to come to a set of criteria for assessing what information is reliable. In general, as you say, what are reliable sources of information? For some, a reliable source of information is any source that confirms what I already believe.
Right. And maybe we're realizing that maybe the statistics aren't that important to the husband. Maybe there is another underlying reason, because the appeal to the expert did not sway him whatsoever, and so maybe she needs to keep on drilling down. Maybe there's something else for his misgivings, and not what he's citing as his reason.
And sometimes with these kind of topics, it could be as simple as identity, that a person identifies, I am an anti-vaxxer, or I am a pro-vaxxer, and they're a part of the group. And to change the belief you're not just changing the belief, you'd have to change your social circle, your neighbors, who you say what to. It could just change the belief. You can't just change the belief in a vacuum. Maybe they'd have to change their whole lives because they identify with it and they hang out with people who believe the same thing. And that can,
for him, but he says 60-40. So, is he really, not to keep on going on to this poor couple, but this one resonates with me because I'm married. I've got, I have these conversations with my wife. We got children. We got to make these decisions. So it's very real.
Okay, Sleepy. You might
All
be muted
right.
again.
Let's go to slide 27. Let's see. The next question is, we actually have this one and the one after. It's very similar, which is just how effective is this method compared to other methods? I've seen a lot of people propose various potential strategies, such as a psychiatrist with something like motivational interviewing or how to talk to a science denier. I understand these aren't all mutually exclusive, and I'm curious to know how this method fits in with the others. When can we know which method to use over another? Stuff like that. There's a lot of different kinds of vaccine hesitancy.
Good question. I wish we had studies showing whether SE was effective or not effective. We only have our personal anecdotal experiences. For us that upload videos, we usually hear back from people who have attempted something similar and they share their results, and it's usually pretty positive. There are also similarities to motivational interviewing and cognitive behavioral therapy. We've even in the course, in the act of putting together this course, that's one of the questions that we have is how does SE compare to other approaches that are out there? And we're getting some really interesting answers. Some of the feedback, it's very similar, or you're even going further than what we would do in a clinical setting. That because we're just lay people who are asking these questions. Whereas like maybe a therapist might offer a solution that the patient finds that would fulfill them. Mm-hmm. Whereas we're usually challenging claims to see how you concluded that it's factually true. And there's an important distinction there. So it's hard to say but there are similarities. There are some differences. This is something that we're still trying to figure out. And we're having people like Mark actually just recently joined the SE community over the last year. And he came from a clinical kind of background. So maybe you can speak to this a little bit.
Yeah, my background is clinical psychology or clinical neuropsychology, and there's a lot of similarities. And that's, I think, when I saw the videos on YouTube, it just made so much sense to me. Immediately realized what was happening, what they were attempting to do, and so, but it's not therapy in that sense, and it's this thing that anybody can practice, and it's a skill that anybody can learn.
Yeah, we formed a nonprofit organization called Street Epistemology International to call attention to what it is that we're doing, so that experts will come forward to help us study SE in a more formal academic setting, so we can see, do people enjoy the talk? Do they have better understanding into their own views? Are they shifting in their level of confidence? Are they interested in learning the tool or the technique in their own interactions? Like stuff that we would say, well, that's probably a good indication that there's something to this approach. But right now we're in the very nascent stages of this, I think.
Yeah, I want to add that it is difficult to compare street epistemology against things like motivational interviewing or CBT, because motivational interviewing, CBT, and other approaches have their intrinsic goals. They were not designed to conduct any kinds of conversation. So actually, street epistemology draws some of the tools from those, from the Socratic questioning as well, from other approaches like deep canvassing, for example. So street epistemology is basically an attempt at creating a compilation of the tools that work best for everyday situations when we talk about beliefs about the world. So unfortunately, currently, we don't have a hard proven scientifically evidence that street epistemology is a great compilation. We hope that it is, and we're willing to put it to test. Currently, there is none, and it is difficult to compare it to something because it's not like we know a lot of different alternative approaches that have the same goal.
Yeah, and up until recently, we haven't really codified what it is we're doing. Like that's one of the cool things about the course is we're writing down exactly what we think is happening and the theory behind it, and putting this out to the world. But ultimately, yeah, it would be great to be able to study it.
Mm-hmm. It is very rigorous. I would just add one additional caveat here, which is that in comparing street epistemology to motivational interviewing or cognitive behavioral therapy, that you proceed from the assumption that the problem of vaccine hesitancy is somewhat medicalized, somewhat problematized. And I think that necessarily treating the problem as a psychological issue with respect to those who are vaccine hesitant may be a bit of you have to recognize the lens that you're applying here, that the vaccine hesitancy may not be some kind of psychological or psychosocial problem. So street epistemology being an informal form of direct, genuine, honest conversation and rapport, it's people speaking to people at a peer-to-peer level. This has an effect too. It's not necessarily a medical approach that you'd pursue.
This is probably a good time to mention that when we're using SE, when we're using street epistemology, we're assessing our conversation partners' process for arriving at their level of confidence that their belief is true, not whether or not the belief is true. It's their confidence level that we're exploring. So there's another very important distinction there.
I think those that are interested in SE kind of recognize that certainty is really appealing. You know, I think I don't have the psychological background that Mark does, but I have this own knowledge in my own head that certainty really feels good. But SE is the process of how did someone arrive at their level of certainty, and if you're certain for good reasons, bully for you. But our goal is to drill down as to is there really merit, or is your certainty well founded? That's very interesting to most people who get involved in SE.
And having said,
sorry, I was just going to say, kind of bringing in the flavor from our perspective here. I think that's why a lot of us on this group are excited about this approach, because what we see in our group as our stories that we share is we see people that have changed very rapidly over a short period of time, over a couple of years. And to me, looking as an outsider, that means that their reasons perhaps aren't very strong, right? Like there are reasons that I feel like there's some conflict that if you can sit with them and help them see that, that's what makes me hopeful. That's part of why when I look at, the sheets and with this approach is if people don't have solid foundations to why they think the way they do, then that's a good sign that this approach may be helpful, right? Because at the end of the day, regardless of statistics, it's about finding the right approach. People are motivated by different things. And this is another tool for these people that have not been motivated by horror stories, deaths of their neighbors, right? All of these others. It's another tool to help them see and uncover their own lack of reasons in many cases, I think.
Yeah, the thing I would like about SE is that it helps you figure out where to meet them so that you can then back off and let them process it or give them the information that they've revealed to you that they need. You might encounter somebody who will respond really well to data, but I wouldn't lead with that. Like, you really need to think about your goals, identify their claim, get their confidence level, figure out their reason. And then at that point, it might start to gel. Oh, this is a person who might really respond to data. And then you can give it to them.
And one of the reasons why I like street epistemology conversations better than conversations involving techniques like CBT is that in these kind of conversations, you actually sometimes have you need to talk about concepts such as truth, and can be elusive. It's elusive at times, but it helps you understand where the person is coming from. And sometimes you'll talk to people and they'll say, well, this belief about anti-vax, my anti-vax views, it's true for me. It's my belief and it's true because I believe it. And then all of a sudden you're having a conversation. What does truth mean? And that could be very telling, because if someone says it's true for me, well, you can give them all the facts in the world. It's still, whatever it is, it's still true for them.
That's a really good point, is that we almost always assume that the person that we're speaking with thinks truth is objective and that there's a true and a false to every claim. And not everybody thinks that way. So that's one of the things that you probably, if you remember on one of the slides, we showed the box of Tic Tacs. That refers to a thought experiment that we'll do. If we ever get the sense that somebody's thinking relativistically, like, oh, well, it's true for me that the vaccine is safe, and it could be true for you that the vaccine is unsafe, that is a red light. That is, you need to stop and address how they're thinking about truth at that point. Mm-hmm. There's the Tic Tacs. So this is just a thought experiment where we ask the person, we hold up the box of Tic Tacs. I have mine right here. I have them handy. I use them on the street. So would you agree that the total number of pieces in the box is either even or odd, and it can't be both? And then depending on how they answer that, you can get a good sense of whether or not they think truth is objective or not. If they think truth is subjective, evidence won't matter. Giving them facts won't matter. You need to address that hurdle first.
Yeah. I got a couple of videos on my channel about that one, by the way.
Oh, yes. He's the master at getting into subjective and objective truth. Yeah, check out Nathan's channel, Abstract Activist. Mm-hmm.
So we have a question on, I'm kind of looking as our time has gone by. I want to make sure we get some good ones. I want to just touch on this issue here where if you go to slide 36, they say, most of the people I've spoken to have changed their mind, have done so over time rather than having a sudden epiphany. Is it better to slowly chip away at people over time, and what techniques work best? And we've talked about that a little bit already, at how this is something that you do in bites and it's over time and you're creating that rapport, and I can see all those things. How do you know when to stop? So that's kind of how I'll kind of tweak this. And how do you know how much to do at once? What would you guys say to that kind of in the frame of this question?
I love the question. So let's get into this one. This is a good one. When do you stop doing SE?
Body language. Watch out for body language. When you're going deep into someone's belief and maybe they identify with this belief, they're a part of a tribe, whatever this belief happens to be, they might start feeling personally uncomfortable, even though we're doing the very best we can to make it about the belief and not about them personally, and trying to separate those two things. People can start feeling uncomfortable. They might start to like rub their shoulder or like rub the back of their neck or something like that. Look for these cues and then maybe check in with them. Hey, how are you doing, by the way? Is this going too fast? Should we slow down? Should we pick this up later? Just get their consent to keep talking. Some people get really uncomfortable, but they don't mind it. So it's kind of hard to know. I like to ask them or I like to ask my conversation partner, I won't know when it's time to end the talk, because I will just keep going. If you let me talk to you, I will talk to you all day long. I'm I'm really interested in this. That can help because that can help carry it forward. Though, yeah, just check in from time to time to see when the time is right to end it. And then you might want to just, if there's an omission from, or is that the right word? If there is
Admission?
what was that?
Admission or omission?
Admission,
I made
yeah.
this exact same mistake recently.
I did.
when I was talking.
I did. If somebody, let's say they say something profound to you that you haven't heard them say before, that might be a good time to end on that note and say, great, well, let's end there. I want to think about what you said, and then maybe like we can pick this up tomorrow or in a couple hours or next week. And I want to listen back to this conversation because I record my talks. and I want to think more about what you said. I hope you do the same. And if you happen to record it, by the way, which is something that I recommend people try to do, even though it's kind of dorky and weird, but everyone's got a phone, just record it. Send them the audio file so they can listen back to their conversation. And it's like a pebble in their shoe. And they've got this file and maybe they'll listen to it back between the last talk and the next talk. And now both of you have more to say the next time you talk.
And the length of a conversation doesn't really matter because there's plenty of examples of people here on this video who will bring a timer and they will time out an SE conversation for 5 minutes. And it's amazing how much you can get accomplished in a 5-minute SE conversation. So and when you do those short conversations, you don't really run the risk of going too long and pushing a person too far, or as much of a risk maybe.
I kind of like that though. You're saying this is how long, right? Like we're gonna just can you just talk with me for this amount of time, and using all these these other tricks you said, which is to deal with the emotion. You say, I care about you. I want to have this conversation. And it's just going to be short, but I want to understand what you have to say. I want to understand why you have the, what your logic is behind this, and just let's talk. I mean, I feel like that's kind of disarming. How long is there an ideal time that you have found between conversations? I mean, if you're doing this a little bit here and there, too long and it doesn't stick, right? I mean, what would you say to that? As far as how far to spread apart conversations like this?
I'd say it really depends on how much weight they put into this belief and how much they identify with it. If they identify with it really strongly, they might need some extra time. If they loosely hold this idea, you might be able to talk to them the next day. Really just, the best way to find out is to ask them.
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's exactly the point I was going to make. That you want to continue these SE conversations right up to the point where you don't have consent to have these conversations anymore. That the idea that each conversation is associated with some kind of informed prior consent, and so if you want to have a conversation and they're willing to have it, then you have it. But if you don't, then that's when it ends.
It could be a real rookie mistake to want to keep pushing because you're noticing that they're thinking about it, and it kind of feeds into your own ego. Like, wow, we had a good talk. Like, they're really thinking about this, and I've never talked to somebody I never talked to this individual about this topic in this way, and it could let's meet again tomorrow. When the best thing that you could do is wait 2 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe wait until they bring it up again or the topic organically comes up. That would be good to stop because you don't want to overwhelm the person. The biggest change seems to happen after the conversation when they're thinking about it. So if you have a good moment of reflection, or what we call aporia, like that moment of I've never really thought about that. That might actually be a good signal to start wrapping it up so that you can end on that note and they can be left with that thinking.
Right, because this is going to be a very different approach for a lot of folks. How many times in life were we actually asked to show our work as far as how we've arrived at a belief? It doesn't happen very often. So it's going to be jarring to the person, even if they don't seem jarred outwardly. Inwardly, they're most likely, this is probably a first time. So to take it slow and like Anthony says, don't overwhelm them. It's kind of like deciding when do you call for the second date kind of a thing. The person who enjoyed the time is probably going to be a little too anxious, and you probably want to give it a little more time before going back to it.
So I would say ideally the time is when they want to talk to you. So general suggestion is just try to be such a conversation partner that people will want to talk to genuinely about any kind of stuff. They will want to just discuss their deepest ideas with you, and they want to know what you think. They want to hear your questions. That would be ideal.
Let's see.
All right.
How are we doing on the questions, Sleepy?
We're doing good. I think we should take, we can take a few more for today. Let me just go see.
Yeah, this is a two-parter, by the way. So we're going to be coming back again in about 2 weeks, did we say? Maybe.
Yeah, we haven't picked a date yet, but I think this, this is to start a conversation for people. I have added the link to the public drive of those tip sheets so that everyone can kind of get into those and see. I think those are such good examples for people to kind of work into their head as just another approach. So another conversation on slide 30 says, I have seen the vaccines referred to by those who refuse them as quaxine, the Fauci ouchie, I see that, jab, Xpera shot, etc. How do you begin a conversation with someone who can't even be rational enough to say the word vaccine? And then they kind of go on about so much resistance is related to fear of long-term effects. And so there's a little bit of a kind of the medical thing of how can we explain vaccines don't have long-term effects when the vaccine they're scared of has only been used for a year. That first part especially, how do you start with that?
I might ask them what it is. What do you mean by that? What is that? What is a vaccine? How does it work?
Good point. Definitions.
I wouldn't care. I would use the term they want to use.
Yep.
Yeah.
Go with the
Go with
word.
their definitions.
Yeah, and that could trigger you too. Like when I see words like that, it tells me you've been reading a lot of material against the position, and you're really sure that this is true. Like if you're adopting tribal language, it shows me that you're really committed to it. And it could be really triggering to be called an evolutionist, for example, or Fauci ouchie or whatever, or snowflake. Like these little terms needle at you, but try to recognize that it needles you and ignore it, or adopt the language, or just like don't even mention it really, because it's not relevant. These little terms aren't relevant. What's relevant is how sure they are that they're correct and their reasoning for getting there. So try to avoid. Those are little triggers to upset you. Those are like easy things to trip over. And my advice would be just like recognize it and move on.
And try not to be judgmental. When you say they are being obviously irrational, those are judgments that I would suggest avoiding. Better to think about it as we're all being sometimes more rational and less rational regarding different kinds of beliefs. So it's nice to think about people as being separate from their beliefs. This person, I love them, and they just happen to hold this belief, which I may or may not agree with. I can just discuss it with them politely. Don't put a tag on them like they're such a such person.
That's a good point, Rom.
The words people use are clues to how they're thinking about their thoughts. That's it. Like just say, it's interesting that you phrased it that way. Now let's like work together to figure out how you concluded that it's true.
And this isn't intrinsically a human problem. We're all walking around with false beliefs. I mean, that's just
all of us.
Part of it.
Yeah.
And some of it is just whether we can recognize it and whether we have the tools to grow and know about it or not.
And there's an SE survey, man. Nathan, you should talk about that because there's an obvious
Right
question.
there
There it is. Right there. That's the one. Go for it.
I was thinking about it. Yeah, like, is it possible that this belief that we're holding is mistaken? And if the answer is yes, how would we go about discovering that? Yeah.
Yeah, the related one is, believing something that is true feels the same as believing something that is false,
That's right.
and that whole appeal to certainty, it all kind of ties together. Yeah.
If you ever want to take a fun detour, you might want to check out the survey that Nathan is really well known for. You can actually facilitate it with multiple people, and you're not even talking about claims like the vaccine or anything like that. You're talking about
epistemologies.
You're talking about epistemologies and how you look at the world and how you're reasoning. And usually in the process of going through that, people bring up claims to help illustrate how they're thinking about things. So it's a really good way of identifying claims to explore. But you don't even have to get into the sensitive nature of claim exploration. And you're talking, like you're exploring. Where can people find that survey? Do we have a link to it on the SE website? I know.
It's a cool questionnaire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Under resources on. Yeah.
I'll put it in the chat. A link to it in the chat.
So this would address exactly the vaccine hesitant person that says, "Well, the vaccine is dangerous, and I just feel that it's dangerous. It's a feeling, and that's how I know it's true."
Right.
And typically, I mean, there's different ways to respond, but you might say something like, "Well, is how you feel about this belief in this case, is this a reliable way to know whether this belief is true? How you feel about it?"
Right. Yeah, so good. You guys have given us so many good things. Let's see. We'll do a few more. One, there's 2 different questions that are very similar, and this one just says, so it's more of a scenario for you. This one says,
Which slide is this?
Slide 29. Thanks, Reid. And it says, I'd like to know if there's a special approach to convincing someone who didn't get vaccinated, subsequently survived COVID, still won't get vaccinated. Is there a different angle to take? And there's another question as well. So somebody who is, I mean, I can think of which excuse kind of category that falls into, but basically this, been there, done that, I'm going to be fine. What are your suggestions for that person?
Same, understand them. So I don't think it would be a significantly different approach. The general rules are the same. Be there with them, understand them, respect them, and discuss their reasoning.
Yeah, maybe a brief discussion about the severity of the virus if they did get vaccinated or something along those lines would be good. But yeah, the process is basically the same. Figure out how they're arriving at that conclusion that they don't need to get vaccinated because they've already survived COVID. You might want to ask them, what would you find convincing otherwise? Like what would you need to see that would cause you to realize that maybe you should actually get the vaccine even though you've had COVID already? Would probably be the way that I would go.
You also ask, like, are your feelings about the vaccine the same across the board for all vaccines?
Yeah.
And that can really help us differentiate, like, they're thinking about this one in particular. And if they are, let's say, the same for all vaccines, and they just really don't think that anyone should take any of them ever, you guys let me know. This may be a leading question, so please correct me if it is. I might ask a hypothetical about whether or not they would prefer to live in a world where no one ever took any vaccines, and what kind of wonder what kind of world that would be. What kind of world would we live in if we all were in a place where no one took any vaccines? What would that look like?
Or vaccines after you've been exposed to the virus. Yeah. Would it be a world that you want to live in or not? Could be. I don't think that's leading. I think that's throwing that out there. You're not trapping them. Yeah.
Or if there was a portal and we could walk through it, and that portal led to the same world as this one, except for vaccines were never discovered. Would that be a better place for you, for your family, for your mom, for your grandma?
Yeah.
Would you want to put other people through that portal? Would you want to live in that world? And if the answer is no, well, that's quite revealing. If it's yes, we got more digging to do to figure out why that is and how they know that would be a better place for us.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Or a world where there's a minimum time before a vaccine is released to the public. Like there's a certain amount of time that it has to be tested for. Which world would you rather live in? Yeah.
Yeah. I love the one when you say, what would you need to see to change your mind? I love that, because when I hear somebody say, well, I got it, I was fine, so I'll be fine again, then, they're basing their entire decision, like you guys have said, I'm learning here, their feelings, right? And they're dictating their decision entirely on their own experience and not the shared experience that we all have, right? And so saying, well, what would you need to see? I really think that makes you go, oh, well, gosh, if I saw that people got significantly sicker the second time, right? If they were logical, right? But so often we forget that our experience is not everybody's reality.
Mhm.
Disconfirmation criteria goes to the heart of what I'm trying to do. I want to know, like, we're always seeking ways in which to confirm our ideas and our beliefs. And so what we're trying to do is ask people to do the opposite of that.
Right.
Yeah.
How do you disconfirm your belief so I can know how you confirmed it, so I can get to where you are?
Very counterintuitive to have a
It's
conversation.
very
like
counterintuitive.
Yeah.
It's Reid's 248 thought
Yeah,
experiment.
That's
Oh,
fun.
that's so
Yeah, that's a funny
good.
game. Yeah. I'll just make a quick observation here, like for anybody watching this, that in the natural thing for people who are not using SE to do is saying, "Oh, come on, you guys, you haven't presented the data for natural immunity and all the research that's been done. You have there's slam dunk, refuting information and data that you should present. Yet in all the answers you've seen here, we haven't talked about that at all, and yet can have somebody consider the path that would change their mind."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Be prepared for somebody to say, like if you say, well, what would you need to see to change your mind? And they say, nothing. Well, then you know that you can stop giving them things and you need to explore the potential liabilities of being so dogmatic about your view, any view, with questions.
And it's also important to remember to ask the same question to yourself.
Yes.
What would I have to know in order to increase or decrease my confidence significantly? And you have to seriously consider it.
Right. This tool is for all of us to become less dogmatic about what we think is true so we can live a more responsible and epistemically healthy life, which we presume is probably beneficial to human beings if we do, which is why we're so excited to be here to be talking about this stuff with y'all.
It might be challenging as the interviewer to do this when you're first starting out doing SE, though ultimately try to ask questions that you're comfortable with answering also, right?
Right.
And prepare for what, like if you're asking for disconfirmation criteria, like what would make them drop their number, think for yourself what would make your number go up.
Mm-hmm.
So you're being fair with your conversation partner. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right.
Cool. What's the next one? We gotta cruise through these. I like
Yeah, there's actually a
We
lot
went
of
to,
them are very similar. So they're
that's an interesting point that we should probably discuss, is that the claim almost doesn't matter because the approach is the same.
Right.
We want to understand what you mean by your words. We want to get a sense of your confidence. We want to figure out your biggest reason that impacts that confidence. And then we want to work with you by asking questions, how you're verifying that you have good reasons. And then all the other stuff at the beginning and the end, like figuring out what your goals are and then ending on a good note and then trying to meet again. Yeah. So that's probably is what we're seeing here, is that most of the advice we're giving is the same because this is such a versatile tool. The claim is almost independent of the advice.
Absolutely.
The best SE conversations I've ever had were about belief claims I've known nothing about. Yeah. Nothing about whatsoever. I have no preconceived notions of what they're talking about. And then I'm free to ask anything and have a blank slate just to try the method.
Yeah, and if you've made it this far, you might be interested in SE and might be wanting to practice it, Thanksgiving or this weekend. Please record it, and we would love to get that recording if whoever you talk to
send it to us.
Is open to having that be public. And maybe next time we could review a snippet of it or something. That would be great.
That would be cool. We are really lacking of examples where people are using SE with loved ones. We have lots of examples with strangers on the street, and we have anecdotes of people using SE with their loved ones, but nothing really recorded. Like audio would be fantastic, video would be phenomenal. But it's like the missing link of SE is actually to see this being used with family and friends. And I think the application is probably a little bit different too. Maybe we can get into that at some point.
Yeah. And
it's a skill. I mean, I've watched myself of the earlier interviews or conversations I used to have, and they're just not as good as they are now. And just keep practicing at it. There's no perfect SE conversation, and it takes a while to get the concepts down and what's happening, and just keep at it.
And this goes to the point of pacing. With Anthony or Reid, they tend to do more of the, the videos you see of them. These are one-offs. They're only going to have this one conversation with that one person for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. Whereas family and friends, these are most likely, unless you get completely alienated from the family, these are going to be repeat customers. So you don't need to tackle the whole topic in one sitting.
Absolutely. So as we kind of wrap up here, so we've put within the post, I put the links so that people can find the guide that you made, the tip sheets, and we are going to schedule, the date is not yet determined, but we will schedule a follow-up, and that follow-up can be more situational. So for those of you that are watching, if you try this or you have more specific scenarios you want us to go through, like the scenario we talked about today, keep those in mind, because when we put up the next invite, those are things that you can put in there, and it'll look something like this, and you'll be able to add yours, and those will be things that we'll go through. As far as other resources to learn more about this, you can see all the YouTube channels that these guys have, where you can see this in action. And then finally, you guys have the most crazy Discord I've ever seen, but maybe that's just because, I'm not a youngin' anymore.
We're a bunch of nerds, so that's what I know.
What can they get out of the Discord if that's something that they want to go to? Tell us about that.
That's a great point.
There is a Discord, Street Epistemology.
Training sessions.
You can practice there.
So they have people. Rom is one of the volunteers. There could be a few. Well, there's people all over the world that volunteer to conduct training sessions where you could practice talking about vaccine hesitancy or the opposite position or anything else in between. And then people will be listening in live. It's usually audio only, so you can have two people talking using SE, and then after the conversation, the observers get to share what they thought about it and give you tips for getting better at it. So if you're looking to practice it or just better understand what it is we're doing, do we have a link to? We'll need to put an invitation link in the post. There probably already is one,
Yeah.
but it's one of the best places at the moment to go to immerse yourself in it. And it is a little bit intimidating. It's taken me 2 years to kind of navigate my way around it. Sometimes even people will go out and live stream and then live stream the audio to the Discord too, and you can listen in as well. But it's just a great resource.
And the practice sessions are friendly. People are doing it for the first time, and the critiques are nice, and it's all for the goal of just be able to practice this method better.
Yeah.
One thing I want to mention is allow yourself to fail.
Yeah.
Record and allow yourself to fail, because you will. And you play back your own conversations. That's how you figure out where you failed. At this point, they said A, B, and C, and I was addressing EDF, right? Yeah. That wasn't the right way to ask my question. And by doing that, you can reform your own way of asking questions, so that way you can bridge that gap of understanding between the two of you. Allow yourself to fail.
Sometimes you may not even know where you screwed up. So just sharing your conversation with somebody, even if you're relaying it, somebody might ask you a couple more questions to help you isolate where it went wrong. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, you can learn from it. We talk about failing forward a lot in street epistemology. Like, even if any one of us here on the panel were to have a talk where we're using SE today, I'm sure we would look back on it and think, oh, I dropped the ball there. That didn't go exactly as planned. Absolutely. That's common. But the key thing is to recognize it and share it with others so that we can all learn from it. And that's what we've been doing over the years. That's why I think we're much further ahead in this technique rebuttal space, because of this community aspect of what we're doing.
Yeah. Well, and you can use the community before you have to use that loved one you're most concerned about too, right? I mean, we wanted to get this first visit before Thanksgiving, but at the same time, I know that it's not like you're going to be ready maybe for this Thursday to do all of this, but we wanted to get this in front of people so they can start thinking. And maybe what you can do over this Thanksgiving break as you talk to people is try to figure out, where do you start? When you have that person who has all these reasons, try to figure out maybe what can be your approach. Utilize the Discord, come on, practice through there. And so that you can be better prepared, because many of us will see that same family again in just 5 weeks, right? So, those resources are there for you. And maybe they're a little friendlier than that family member that you are so emotionally wrapped up in right now, right? So you can take advantage. And there's going to be, and as I said, there will be at least a second parter. And, we just want to help people. I mean, our our group is, we've done some really good things in our group. We've convinced now 100 people to get vaccinated from some of the horror stories they've seen. It's a different approach, more of a scared straight approach, but we know it doesn't work for everybody. And we're trying to find ways to get people as many tools in front of them, as much information as possible, so that this, no one else has to lose a loved one. I mean, Bob, you shared your story, and that's, that's awful to go through and to watch and to lose somebody. So that's really where we're coming from and why we wanted to get this tool out in front of you.
And thanks, Sleepy, for doing what you do. This is it's really important what you're doing. Yeah.
So I would suggest one quick between now and the next one time we do this. One quick homework assignment to anybody who's watching this and has gotten this far is to take a look at least a minimum of one or two street epistemology videos in the various YouTube channels that you see represented here. Being Reasonable, with Mark, Nathan at Abstract Activist, Reid at Cordial Curiosity, Rom at Rom. Well, I don't know how many people can speak Russian, Rom, but anyway, there you go. And Bob, Bob at Mortgage Hill Music, and of course Anthony's the main really good channel there. So take a look at these channels. You can get the links to these channels also at the through the Street Epistemology Discord channel as well, and also on the Street Epistemology website. So that's your homework assignment, to get out there and take a look at some of these SE conversations, and we'll see more informed questions in our next time we get together on this.
Yeah, and try not to make a snap judgment about the method by watching one or two videos. You'll watch like a host of them on different various topics.
From different people, because we all do it differently.
People.
Yes.
And maybe try to pick something more recent too. Nothing from like 2014, 2013,
Right,
2015. Because you'll notice a lot of fact giving and maybe even ridicule, and it doesn't go very well, because this has been a learning process for us too.
It's like potato chips. Once you watch some, you got to keep going.
Yeah, and then something really amazing starts to happen. You start to see what it is we're doing, and it's really captivating.
Well, then you start noticing in other conversations too, like, oh, that's where they went wrong, because they were talking past each other in the definition of that word.
Right. But this is also a growing thing, right? This is a fairly new, right? I mean, this kind of movement and this technique and this approach is fairly new. So, I mean, of course, you're going to get better with time. To now where you are at this place, and you have so many resources with the course and the Discord and all of that. So thank you guys so much for doing this. Anthony, for being so helpful. I mean, I emailed him on a Friday night and was like, not thinking that this would go anywhere, and it did. So I'm excited. And I hope this helps some people with the loved ones they care about.
Thank you so much for having us on.
Really
this is
awesome.
wild. And we'd love to see more of these too, not just with us, but anyone else interested in SE. Like, reach out to groups like Sleepy is a part of, and see if you can put something together. Let's get the word out on this.
Okay. Yeah. All right, guys. I'll see you next time.
Okay.
Thanks, you guys.
Thanks, everybody, so much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.